Gators Breakdown episode 63 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And we finally have the trio back together. Joey and Bill and I back for Gators Breakdown episode 63. You can find Joey Vizzi on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports. And Bill Sykes on Twitter at RealBSykes. Gentlemen, it's good to have you both back in the fold again.
Yeah, we're here for mediation. I think it's a court order thing.
Was court ordered to go through anger management classes because he kept taking his anger out on me, and I pressed charges. But he's got a restraining order. Yeah, but I'm allowing him this, close proximity.
Yeah, but at least I can go within 500 feet of a school.
Oh, all right. Good to have everybody.
I don't know who you're speaking to. I can.
That's good.
David.
I'm good. That was good. I just assumed he was talking to Joey. I guess it could have been me. He likes to call me a drunkard. So I guess.
I think this has something to do with the trip to the Bahamas, maybe.
Yeah, Dave's like, my record is sealed. How did you find out about that?
Oh, all righty. We'll move on here. So remember, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites. Get the links by following us on Twitter at Gators Breakdown and on Facebook as well. Just search Gators Breakdown. And please also share the show if you like it. Leave a review, rate on iTunes, put the word out there for Gators Breakdown. We know we're kind of blowing up out there, but we can definitely have some more listeners, and we know how big that Gator Nation is. So definitely want some more back and forth with you listeners out there, and get the word of Gators Breakdown out there. So guys, late last week it was kind of announced Nick Saban will be paid $11.125 million. This season under a 3-year contract extension. Altogether, the 8-year deal running through January 31st, 2025. Saban scheduled to make $65 million, not including incentives, blah, blah, blah. So, but since Saban has come into the league in 2007, and once, Bama pulled the SEC away from Florida, Crimson Tide has dominated college football and has caused quite a stir in the SEC coaching circle. Been 24 head coaching changes in the SEC since Saban has taken over at Alabama. We've seen the likes of Urban Meyer when he left our Gators program. Also the likes of Mark Richt, Les Miles, Phil Fulmer, Steve Spurrier leave in that time as well. Even Gene Chizik, 2 years after winning the national championship at Auburn. It can really be pinpointed to that Saban has everyone chasing Bama, and that has costed many of these coaches their jobs. So with the current crop of coaches and many, just in right now a short tenure, who's the second best coach in the SEC? I think there's only quite a few who can be put in that conversation. I think Jim McElwain, Gus Malzahn, a lot of people like Dan Mullen in that category. Hugh Freeze, maybe. And some even might say, Butch Jones. But to me, I'm counting Tennessee. Butch Jones out right now. Vols had the best roster in the East last year, a clear path to the division. Even though they beat Florida and Georgia, still lost 4 conference games, couldn't beat South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Can't do that in years you pick to win. So Joey, if we're looking at it right now, you put a list together. I don't know if you agree with those are about the only names you could probably put in second. But would you have Jim McElwain second behind Nick Saban in the hierarchy of SEC coaches?
Well, yeah. I mean, you kind of got to. The guy's gotten to the SEC championship game with, pretty terrible players on offense the last 2 years. Obviously there's been spotty talent, but, as far as a whole, I mean, nobody's done more with less, in my opinion, than Jim McElwain. Who said Butch Jones? I mean, Clay Travis isn't even a Butch Jones fan, and he's the most Tennessee homer you'll find out there. So who in their right mind said Butch Jones? I understand the Dan Mullen thing. I do understand because he's really taken a program that had no business playing football in the Southeastern Conference and taken the number one in the polls a couple years ago. Obviously turned Dak Prescott into Rookie of the Year. And this year it looks like Nick Fitzgerald could be the next great thing in the SEC. So, I get it. He's an excellent offensive mind. But it's got to be Jim McElwain by default, in my opinion. I mean, Jim McElwain's. I mean, if you want to say owning the East Division, if that's a positive, I guess, or I don't know really how to pump that up, but he has owned the East Division since he's taken over at Florida. So, obviously it's not Orgeron. We saw that he struggled this year a lot, especially in big games. Hugh Freeze I think he's on his way out at Ole Miss. I think they're on the verge of getting rid of him. Kevin Sumlin's been walking the tightrope for the last 2 years. Who knows if he'll even make it past November this year? I mean, if I think has another 8-4 season, I think it's safe to say that he's gone. So, I mean, who do you look at right now? Mark Stoops. I mean, Mark Stoops, yeah, he's got a much better team than he did 3 years ago, but he still hasn't been able to win or even get close to winning a bad East Division. Obviously that leaves, Jim McElwain, Gus Malzahn, he's been arguably the biggest disappointment in the SEC the last couple of years. Auburn's been picked to compete with Alabama for the SEC West the last, 2 out of the last 3 years, and they've done nothing but fall short. So, I guess it's Jim McElwain by default.
Yeah. Joey, I don't necessarily disagree with everything you're saying. The thing that got me in what you said is you say who's done more with less. Well, I would say Dan Mullen has. Because yes, Florida has been a mess. But I don't think that Jim McElwain has done more than elevate Florida more than part way out of the Muschamp hole. Whereas, Mullen made Mississippi State part of the national conversation at times. And of course, they're not they don't have staying power to be on the elite level. But if you look at it from that perspective, I kind of think Mullen has made the bigger impact. That's not to say that he will end up the better. And I think really the problem here is that when you get beyond Saban, you can make an argument for a guy like Dan Mullen and say, yeah, well, he's done pretty good because he's at Mississippi State. But it's really muddy. I mean, the SEC doesn't have this little round table of elite coaches right now. They've got Nick Saban. And beyond that, well, Hugh Freeze looked primed. I mean, the guy had won at another school, won a conference title at another school, was recruiting like gangbusters, winning some big games, generating real buzz. Well, now that's all kind of crumbling into a facade where there's all kinds of allegations going on and everything else. Malzahn's star is fading a little bit offensively, even though, believing they won an SEC title there with him.
And a national title. Well, that was
no. He was
yeah.
But that was also his first year. I'm so funny about these first year guys because you're just taking the torch, and it's like, okay, well, here's the ready-made package. You just go call plays, and that, not to say that that's not good, but that's not indicative of who you are as a program builder. I mean, like you said, it's certainly not Malima. I mean, really, as much as we knock Butch Jones, and as much as he's really turning into a PR nightmare for his school, I mean, the guy had won 4 conference championships before Tennessee. I mean, he was the guy that had the pedigree to come in and really challenge. And it's only now looking like that might not happen. But for me, I think I would go now. I'm going with Mullen. I think he's still proven the most. He's, what McElwain is supposed to be good at offensively. I think Mullen has proven more with, Dak Prescott and the offense he's come in with. But I think that there is potential for McElwain to be that guy.
But Bill, there's two different, most valuable coach to his team or the best head coach in the SEC? Because there's a difference between MVP and the best player in the league. I mean, and basketball is a perfect example of that, MVP, because if you take him off the floor, the Oklahoma City Thunder are absolutely atrocious. But the best player in the league is James Harden this year. I mean, this year it was James Harden. So I can understand your argument for Mullen being the most valuable coach to his program, because if you take Dan Mullen off of Mississippi State, I think they win 3 games a season. But as far as best coach, you got to go with the most accomplished. And obviously it's Nick Saban, and then it's got to be Jim McElwain. Jim McElwain has a better winning percentage in his last 2 years in the SEC than Mullen has in the last 2 years in the SEC. And obviously Mullen's been there to be able to recruit his guys the last 8 seasons. So, you know, I get what you're saying with the most valuable coach, but the best head coach, I can't agree with Dan Mullen at all. And Butch Jones is not in the conversation at all. I know you brought his name up. I think he's a decent recruiter, but I think he's a terrible head coach. I don't think he's a motivator at all. I don't think guys want to play for him. I mean, look at the whole thing with the Jalen Hurts situation. I mean, that was a nightmare. You know, he quit on his team. If you're a good coach and you've coached that kid for 3 years, you don't allow your best running back to quit on your team. I don't think Butch Jones I think he's a dead man walking. I think he's out after this season. I think Tennessee only wins 6 games this year. And I think he's out. If he's not, I don't know why he wouldn't be, but I don't think he's a good coach. I think like I said, by default, it's McElwain.
Yeah. And believe me, I'm not promoting Butch Jones as even really a top 5 coach in the SEC right now. I'm just saying he looked primed to be that guy before this disastrous last season and all the events that surrounded that. And, you know, he just looks like a guy that's just over his head a little bit to me. I think he would have been fine at another smaller conference where some of these things he says don't get plastered on billboards and things like that. You know, I think the problem I have with what you're saying is that, you know, when you talk about OKC, well, that coach is not anymore responsible for bringing players into his program. And I think that, you know, what we have to look at is that these guys it's the whole package. That's the CEO, the recruiter, the on-field guy, the motivator, the life coach, and all these other things. And McElwain has not proven that he is elite as a total package yet. He certainly looks like he's doing the right thing with facilities. He looks like he's shaping the roster the way he wants it, and he's getting the most out of his players at times. Now, his record versus ranked opponents doesn't show that yet. The recruiting doesn't show that yet, but there are signs that it could be turning around. It's just a muddied mess. And this is something that's going to develop and really unfold, I think, this year. Because when you look at guys like Kirby Smart, well, we're about to find out one way or another with this guy. He could make a huge move up to the top 2 easy if he has a 11-win season and comes out of nowhere. But if they come out and win 7-8 games again, you know, if he starts to resemble Muschamp 2.0, well, he could end up in the bottom 3 or 4 this year. You know, you've got guys like Orgeron that have a lot to prove. You know, what if Stoops comes out and wins 9 games and turns out to be a dark horse in the East? You know, and of course, McElwain. You know, McElwain's maybe the guy that, you know, everybody is watching with bated breath to see, is the quarterback going to show up? So this is going to be a continuous, you know, discussion throughout the season. But right now, I just don't think that McElwain has proven enough yet, and not as much as Mullen.
Yeah, I think what I want to look at, it's pretty hard to separate some of these guys because I'll admit, and I think we all know, playing in the East can make it look easier than playing in the West. I mean, you put Dan Mullen and the Mississippi State team in the East, I can't say they wouldn't win the East or one of these last 2 years, or, you know, given that, especially Prescott's senior year, they probably would have won the East over Florida. So, but I'll give Mac a little more credit here because he has, you know, beaten 2 really good West teams. Ole Miss his first year, LSU this past year. LSU was playing really good at that point. And I think that's, you know, knowing he has no quarterback, plays to the strength of his defense. But, of course, you know, like we mentioned, the defense he hasn't necessarily brought in. But McElwain is the first coach to win division titles in his first 2 years as an SEC school. So, you know, the sample size pretty much from when we want to put McElwain maybe second behind Saban is his sample size. It's small, and in the small sample size, he's won the East twice. You know, fortunate to take over a roster from Will Muschamp that had a great defense. Offense, which he was brought here to fix, hasn't been anything special. So it's kind of, I think we can really agree. It hinges a lot on this season. I think you can put Mullen, McElwain second. You can't really go wrong either way. I'm kind of high on Malzahn as well. But just seeing what he's, you know, I think last year Auburn was kind of on the uptick way back till Sean White got hurt and then kind of derailed their season a little bit. That's kind of like the way they look. But, just as another looking at McElwain, if you don't have the quarterback, it's kind of hard to determine. Both teams had to rely on good defense. Both teams found ways to win. But, of course, it's all behind Saban. And it's once you see what Florida can do in the SEC title game the last 2 years, you realize the gap between first and second. And if McElwain's second, well, that's how big the gap is. And we've seen really Hugh Freeze being the only guy who can, 2 years in a row beat Saban. So I really do think it's really only McElwain, Malzahn, and Mullen. So I guess if your last name starts with an M, you're good enough for second place. But it's just I don't think you can go wrong either way with Mullen and McElwain. I know we've had Barrett Sallee on in the past, and he said on his podcast he would go with Mullen. Peter Burns from SEC Network said he would go with Mullen too. So there's a lot of Mullen love out there for him being the second best coach in the SEC.
And the irony is he was on before Dak Prescott in his junior season when Mississippi State kind of, became a national spotlight. I mean, he was on the verge of getting fired. And that was just 4 years ago, 4 years ago. I mean, he was on his way out. So it's just crazy how far, relation has swayed his way over the last couple of years.
I was just looking at my Twitter when I put this out to the fans, and Joshua at the Downstriker, he says he'd rather have Mac than Smart, Sumlin, and Freeze. And I think at the end of the day, it is about saying, well, who would I want from these guys? Not what would you do at Mississippi State, not who's accomplished the most or whatever. It's, apples to apples. If we plug these guys into the University of Florida, who do you want? I mean, obviously Saban is the number one choice, but I kind of think Hugh Freeze would be a dangerous commodity at Florida in more ways than one, against opponents, but also probably with the NCAA. Malzahn is an intriguing pick there, and I think he's had probably somewhat comparable talent at Auburn, so you have to wonder what he could do there. But, if one day the stars align, we might get to see Mullen in Gainesville, and it's going to be interesting to watch that unfold.
I said no one's done more with less in McElwain. I could argue the opposite from Malzahn. No one's done less with more over the last couple of years. So I'll pass on Malzahn. Hard pass, actually.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of upside, and it tends to swing with him. I feel like he's capable of having these explosive offenses, and that he's capable of looking like a high school coach coaching Auburn. So I kind of agree with you there.
I mean, think about this: how much is SEC coaching down? And I've kind of posed this question to you guys earlier. Where would the second-ranked SEC coach rank in the nation?
Yeah.
I mean, ACC, you Dabo
15 to 20.
I mean, you get ACC, Dabo, Jimbo, Petrino, Richt. You could throw all those guys up there. Maybe Fedora. Probably where I kind of cut it off right there. Big Ten, of course, Urban, Harbaugh, Franklin, D'Antonio. Only one bad season lately at Michigan State last year. Pac-10 probably a little more equal. We don't have a guy who really, really stands out yet, but Peterson at Washington, of course, Whittingham at Utah, the things he's been able to do a lot lately. Big 12, Stoops, Gundy, Holgerson, maybe Patterson. He's kind of fell off lately at TCU, but those are probably names right there you would throw before you even get to McElwain or Mullen.
Yeah, the Big Ten and the ACC have really – it seems like they've focused on making those boss moves in the coaching ranks, and it's paying off for them. I mean, there was a lot of debate when Muschamp was on his way out about Franklin when he was at Vanderbilt, and some of the more hawkish fans that wanted the premature coaching change moves were like, hey, let's go chase Franklin. And really the timing just wasn't right. And sometimes that is a part of it, but they have been fortunate, both those conferences that you mentioned, the Big Ten and the AC, to really bolster their ranks. And right now, for whatever reason, whether it is, the timing of offensive struggles and quarterback deficiencies, or whether it is just a coaching problem, the SEC seems to have thinned out a little bit on its elite coaching candidates and its elite coaches at the top, other than Saban. I mean, even with Miles leaving, a lot of people would still put him in their top 5 or 10 coaches in the country.
Can we just put to rest the Harbaugh argument? Outside of recruiting, what has the guy done? I mean, he hasn't finished better than third in his own division. He hasn't beaten Ohio State in the 2 years he's been at Michigan. I mean, let's just pump the brakes on him right now until he actually does something. You know what? I'm
But a lot
so
of people are
sick
going
and
to put
tired of all this.
people are going to put a lot of stock in him destroying Florida in a bowl game last year.
Yeah, and we can pump the brakes, but we can't put it to rest. I mean, that's going to play out. You know, again, this is over the course of the next year or so, but that guy could rise to the top.
Are we putting stock in a Citrus Bowl game where half the team didn't even want to be there? I mean,
Sure.
after a blowout loss to Alabama, half the team was leaving to the draft. Vernon Hargreaves quit half the way through the game and got benched. He didn't even want to play anymore. You know, I mean, Treon Harris obviously was a shell of himself. I mean, we know what he wasn't. So I'm not even putting much stock into that Citrus Bowl blowout of Florida because Michigan wanted to be there more than Florida did, okay? Michigan, that was the best bowl game they had been to probably in multiple years. And obviously Florida was looking to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game and got beat handily. So I don't like that game, the stock being put into that game. And I'm not saying Harbaugh is not a good coach. Obviously, he's proven it on multiple levels. He was a good coach at San Diego. He was a good coach at Stanford. He was a good coach, you know, in the NFL. But Michigan in the 2 years, besides recruit good players, I mean, I'll wait for him to beat Ohio State next year and win his division before I claim him to be a one of the best.
All right, well, hang on. Let me ask you this, Joey. Just for a second, humor me on this. What would you say were Florida's 2 best wins last year?
In 16 or 15?
This past year, and this is not a trick question. You may not agree with me. But.
Okay. Probably LSU,
and
obviously, through the circumstances. And probably the Kentucky win was big because it helped Florida win the East. You know, I mean, that was actually a huge win. And probably Georgia. Georgia was another one. So I'd probably say LSU and Georgia were probably the 2 biggest.
Well, and my point being is, you know, against LSU, you got a interim head coach, complete, you know, chaos in that program with Les Miles leaving. You know, and one of the other ones, Georgia, you got a brand new head coach, you know, and a complete regime change, and you know the chaos that creates when you have turnover. And that's not to throw shade on those wins, but you have to line up and beat the opponent that you're scheduled to play each week.
Florida was an underdog in that LSU game, Bill. Florida was a heavy underdog in that game.
Well, so what? What I'm saying is we don't want people telling us they're not going to put a lot of stock in Jim McElwain because Ed Orgeron was an interim head coach. And we don't want them saying we're not going to give him a lot of credit for that Georgia win because Kirby Smart was new. You line up and play the opponent in front of you.
Jim McElwain also beat the number 3 Ole Miss team, only his 4th game into his head coaching career at Florida. So that Florida was also heavily favored to lose.
That's great. No, that's good. I'm just saying that we can't knock a coach because we say, well, that team that showed up didn't want to play. Well, his guys did. He got his guys ready to play, and that's not a summary judgment on him. And you're right. Harbaugh is the jury is way out on him. It's going to be a while. And again, this is going to be something. 2017 is going to reveal a lot about a lot of coaches, just like every season does, because it's a fluid environment every year. But I'm saying, no, we can't put the issue to bed. The judgment can't be made because he has got some buzz there. He's got some recruits come in. We'll see what he can do. Now, he might become Urban's whipping boy permanently, and I'm still picking Florida in that game. And so if he rolls in with a Florida loss and an Ohio State loss at the end of the year, has 3 or 4 losses, well, I think we're going to legitimately at that point be able to say, maybe this guy's not what we thought. You know,
run back.
Not yet.
Run back. So
I posed a question on Twitter. So where would you rank Jim McElwain and SEC coaching out there to our followers? Out of 411 votes, 60% said second, 23% said third, 7% said fourth, and 10% said fifth or higher. So I'd like to know who those people out there had higher. But some good feedback there. Clint Lawrence got to be number 2 with no hype into this team, winning with poop emoji QBs. And the one position that is handicapping this team. Gator content. He's got 13-3 regular season record in the SEC in his first 2 seasons. Pretty damn good considering what he inherited on offense. TJ Pittenger, from a FSU point of view, probably 4th behind Malzahn and Freeze. UF fans blame Mac for what was left over on O, but don't give enough praise for D left over from Will Muschamp. Robert Kraft on the field, one of the top coaches, recruiting middle of the pack, but he has hired assistants to make up differences, only behind Saban, So, D. Woolbright, I think he's second outside of Saban and possibly Malzahn, has more on-field accomplishments than any other coach out there. So, yep. And
we're
Joey,
going to find out here shortly.
Yeah, and that was pretty.
Like I said, 2017, it's going to tell us a whole lot about a whole lot of these coaches, and I think one way or another, we're going to have some different opinions.
Yeah, and Joey was calling people out today, and good for that. I mean, who really would put McElwain fifth or higher? I can't see that. That's kind of unreal.
And there was a certain
You meant 5
through
through 14. You're saying who would put him number 5 through 14?
Yeah,
I have a feeling that Karen, she just created a bunch of fake troll accounts and then just kept clicking on the poll, with each one of her accounts, but clicking the last one, So,
and I thought I was your nemesis.
Okay, all right. Tom McShay last week, guys, put out his first 2018 mock draft. No surprise. He had Sam Darnold taken by Cleveland, number 1 overall. But it was kind of surprised he did have Antonio Callaway being picked. But it would be the third receiver taken. At number 5, he had Minnesota taking Calvin Ridley. At 13th, Washington picking Christian Kirk. And then the 21st pick, he had the Ravens selecting Antonio Callaway. So I think kind of caught me by surprise a little bit. I had thought about Callaway, but I kind of thought maybe quarterback play would maybe hold him back a little bit. And he's led the Gators in receiving yards each of the last 2 seasons, his first 2 seasons there. And how much can these scouts away – or how much can these scouts take away from what they've seen with Callaway with no quarterback play? I think we've seen plenty of times he's been open, but the quarterbacks can't get the ball to him. Felipe Franks, or whoever the quarterback is, could be Callaway's big ticket to an even higher draft pick. I believe so. I believe we haven't seen the best from Callaway yet because of the quarterback play. And you heard from around the program this past spring that he's even more dedicated, become even more in tune as a route runner. Already shown great speed, great body control. He can fine-tune those skills as well. The knock on him is going to be his size, 5'11", 197. That's from the Florida website, so hopefully those measurements are true, but he might be closer to 5'9", 5'10", 180 pounds. He might be, in the NFL, a lot more physical corners there. So I think, maybe if he can bulk up a little bit more, but keep that speed, I still think, he's going to be a first-round pick. But, if you look at this past NFL draft, there were 3 wide receivers chosen in the first round. So I remember I said Callaway, 5'11", 197. Corey Davis was 5th overall to the Titans from Western Michigan, 6'3", 209. Mike Williams, 7th overall to the Chargers from Clemson, 6'4", 218. Then you get to John Ross, 9th overall to the Bengals, 5'11", 188. Very, very similar to Callaway in size there. So I don't think NFL teams won't be too shied away from that. But Ross, of course, clocked 4.2, 240 at the NFL Combine. Callaway isn't that fast. He's fast, but he's not that fast. He's been clocked around 4.4. So I really think, guys, if you look at that, Callaway, I really think you can look at that John Ross from Washington and see that similar mold there. And Callaway, with his production, I think if he can get some more things out of Felipe Franks, whoever the quarterback is, he really can become a big weapon and move up in the first round of this NFL draft next year.
You guys know I did a spreadsheet on this, right? I couldn't help myself. I went and analyzed all the first round draft pick wide receivers since 2006, and it was 43 of them. And that's an interesting point you make there. Jacob Benson over on the on the Gator Bait board, he says he doubts he'll go in the first round because of his size. He's probably going to be a second rounder. Well, I went through and found out that there were actually 10 wide receivers that were drafted under 6 feet tall since 2006 in the first round. 33 of them were over 6 feet. So 23%. But then also, he was a 3-star. So I also went and kind of cross-referenced that with the 3-star wide receivers since 2006. And there's only been 4 of those drafted in the first round. And so that makes it 9% of the total first-round draft pick wide receivers in the last 10 drafts. But even though I'm a huge advocate of the numbers don't lie, you can't just look at that and discount him in that micro-analysis sense, because the guy's good. He's really good. And he actually reminds me of one that went back 10 years ago that was also from South Florida, which was Antonio Holmes. He went to Ohio State. He was a 5'11" wide receiver. I think Callaway might be a little more fluid than he is and a little thicker in the body. And Santonio Holmes had a great pro career. I think he could be that similar type of player.
Yeah, Bill. I mean, if you look at his numbers, people kind of said he had a down year this year. He really didn't, actually. Some of his numbers got better. In his freshman year, he only had 35 receptions, and this year he had 54. He only had 678 receiving yards as a freshman. He had 721 this year. He had one less touchdown. Yard per catch was 6 yards lower. But I think that was because he was getting a lot of short screens and a lot of short routes thrown to his way instead of the deep ball. Obviously, we know Treon Harris helped get the deep ball to him as a freshman, and this year it was the arm talent was a little more limited this year. So, but his rushing yards increased. He had more rush attempts. He had more rushing yards, which I could tell they're using him obviously on a lot more those jet sweeps, which is good. I think obviously he had a down year special teams wise, but I think he was trying to do too much. I really do. I think a lot of his mishaps on special teams were him trying to be a superhero. But I think he's a first round talent all the way. I mean, I don't even care who's playing quarterback this year. You could have, the kid from the Play 60 commercial, Nate, playing quarterback back there. And, I think Callaway's a first-round talent. I think scouts and GMs just see the player that he is and the player that he could be. I think he's the kind of guy that is getting better at each year. We talked last week, David, about Marcus May getting better each year. I think Callaway's that guy that's just going to keep getting better each year, going all the way into the NFL. That his potential is obviously extremely high, and I can't see any reason why he wouldn't be a first round pick, barring, an injury, that would keep him out for, most of the season. But I think just the talent alone will attract, NFL GMs. Look at the safety from Ohio State, Malik Hooker. Guy played 13 games in his college career, but he got drafted based on his talent and what NFL scouts and GMs think he could be. And I think that's going to be with Callaway. Callaway obviously doesn't have a quarterback, and I think actually scouts and GMs are going to look in favor of that with Callaway, that he's putting up the numbers that he's putting up with basically, junk behind center. So I think that's only helped him the last 2 years, basically that he's been 70% of Florida's offense the last 2 seasons. So, I absolutely 1,000% believe that not only will he go in the first round, I think Antonio Callaway is going to have a long and productive career, like Bill said.
I tell you what, I'd have loved to seen practice about last year going into fall. I'd have loved seeing Callaway versus Tabor and Wilson, some of those practices. That would have been fun to have some insight there and watch them two, or them go at it.
Yeah, I just want to kind of springboard off this, guys. I think the key thing here, Patrick Hopp, one of our Twitter followers, says it depends on Franks and the O-line, and we got the same thing from Blake Jacoby over on Gator Bait. He mentions he hadn't had a quarterback to throw him the ball, and I think it's going to be key for the GMs and the draft war rooms to be convinced that the limitations on Callaway's stats, only having 7 touchdowns in 2 years, are a reflection of the offensive struggles. And I think that is a reasonable assumption. I mean, if you look, he doesn't really take over games with 10, 12 catches and 150, 200 yards. But I think that's reasonable to expect because of the struggles Florida's had. And if you look, it kind of mirrors his success. His best games were Kentucky this year, where he had 129 yards and a touchdown with a healthy Del Rio. This big game before that was Tennessee, when Grier was kind of emerging in the fourth quarter there and maybe looking like the guy. Other than that, it's kind of been very moderate, 70, 50-yard games. Like I said, not a lot of touchdowns. He could really help the red zone this year, red zone production for Florida. And Florida's red zone production could help others' perception of Callaway. So hopefully, if Franks gets it going, this guy could be off the chart stat-wise this year. This could be Florida's first, big-time first-round draft pick wide receiver since Harvin.
Yeah, I mean, and going back and looking at it, I know it was a simple play and it wasn't like the big play. Besides the Tennessee, fourth quarter win where he caught the pass and of course, outran everybody from Tennessee. That first touchdown catch from Austin Appleby against Alabama when they were on the goal line and he had to beat a defender, reach up and get the ball, honestly, may be his best play of his career. Taking into account who they're going against and what he had to do to get that touchdown. That was, to me, that was big time NFL top catch play right there.
Yeah, and that's something else I looked at here. He doesn't exactly disappear against tough opponents. I actually broke down the stat averages between the wins and the losses. And, his it's his yards per catch and his yards per game actually have gone up in their losses. Touchdowns are down by 1, only had 3 versus 4 against the wins. So it's not like he's shying away from good competition. I really do think this is an issue of just not having somebody give them the ball.
Yeah, one of our next topic, one of our faithful listeners, TH, sends us a question, and Bill, you can help us answer this. What are the offensive expectations for Florida this season, and what would you consider a successful offensive production year?
Y'all had an argument about this a couple weeks ago.
There's been so many.
Well, that's why I'm letting Bill take this, because I'm letting him try to get redemption for the many L's that I hand him. I hand him all the L's.
Oh, yeah, but before that, TH and Natural, I'll call him out here. Great video editing. All those videos he throws out there. Awesome stuff there.
Well, I won't go as far as like Aaron Wells just tweeted at me. He said, "Hey, Callaway's going to get 1,200 yards this year. Book it." I don't think we have to see. Hey, who knows? I don't think we have to see that kind of monstrous output from any individual player. We keep going back to this word functionality. We've got to see that red zone efficiency get a lot better, regardless of where they finish in total offense, because I'm not so concerned that they're just running up and down the field yardage wise on people, because I hope they're also winning the field position battle with their defense and the punting game. I just want to see the offense come through against quality opponents as they get into the meat of the schedule. And I think it's going to be a general feel. And I think we'll look at a number of metrics between the red zone offense. We'll see turnover ratio. I mean, we do need to see the passing game more efficient. I don't want to get into that game of let's see a top 40 passing game, because I want to see Scarlett running the ball well. But if we're seeing a guy like Frank standing in the pocket, and the sack rankings are good, the turnover rankings are good, and they do have decent production yardage wise and good. If they have a good red zone offense, then it's going to be a lot better. Any of those things will help, but we need to see them all take those steps forward to that, functional feel. And we're going to know it when we see it. We're going to know it.
I think going back to that, looking at, we really want to see what we saw from Will Grier. It's not like he was lighting the world on fire, but it was converting third downs. It was getting in the red zone. It was scoring. It was getting in field goal range. Again,
it puts you in a position to win.
Yes, exactly. So while we know, and rival fans out there will not still give credit. Oh, Will Grier wasn't the greatest thing. A lot of us never said he was. It was, but at least the offensively functional. It looked like, it was quarterback led. Kelvin Taylor didn't run crazy, but it actually, Will Grier's play helped him. So I really just think, I have to go back and look what the Florida offense was ranked after the Missouri game, after Will Grier's last game, see what was ranked in the nation, and maybe if it would continued that. But besides the big explosion against Ole Miss, it was just enough to where we saw progression, enough to what we saw and get excited for, at least an offense that's functional and not putting the defense in bad position.
Aaron Wells says Franks is going for over 3,000 yards. Book it.
Aaron likes booking it.
We'll see. Aaron. Aaron, yeah, we'll see.
I like Aaron.
Aaron. Bold prediction. That's a bold. We don't even know if Felipe Franks is going to be the starting quarterback, Aaron. But my guess is, as far as the quarterback situation, I think that Zaire's headed elsewhere. There's word now that he's going to make his decision even before the SEC makes their decision.
Yeah, I think that does kind of ink towards that's probably not Florida. Some even say, well, that means he'll say Florida if the rule gets changed and still name another school. He's not doing that. If it's May 19th, and I think that's like a week and a half.
Week.
Yeah, and it's like a week and a half before the meetings even start, I believe, because those meetings are late May, I think, going into June. I don't think it would be Florida if that. Quickly before we go, Joe Milton commits to Michigan, guys. I think that's kind of confirmed everything we knew. Everything in the basket for Justin Fields. They are going hard after him. So it seems to be Justin Fields, maybe Jaron Williams, or bust at this point, but it's really all in on Justin Fields at this point. And a lot of people out there saying, and it's a lot of rival fans, y'all didn't slow play Milton. Y'all just couldn't get him. Y'all couldn't reel him in. Sorry. Enough of us know if
fake news.
Fake news. If Florida really, 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 really wanted Joe Milton, from everything we've been told, Florida just didn't pursue hard enough. They were going to wait till the fall. They were going to wait till they could get him on campus to see him closer, throw in person, wait till the fall to get some more tape on him. But it's as it stands right now, Florida is in love with Justin Fields. All eggs are in that basket.
As I reported a month ago, David, it was an uncommittable offer. The coaches were kind of just walking on eggshells with Milton. They gave him an offer basically because they were very interested and they were very intrigued in what kind of quarterback he could be. But there were coaches warning the Florida coaches to kind of watch and wait and stay away at this point in time, because there's a lot of question marks with Milton's character. There's a lot of question marks with his style of play. So don't let people make you believe that Florida missed on Joe Milton, because they did not. Florida allowed Joe Milton to go to Michigan.
Yeah, and listen, guys, y'all know that I've been critical of the recruiting situation at Florida and how it's been the last 2 years, but this is just the way it is. I mean, right now Florida has got Fields at the top of their board. It looks like both Jaron Williams and Emory Jones may be up there as well. So this one's going to have to play out. And hey, don't write off the situation yet. A lot of time these commitments are actually reservations, and if the opportunity does come around, if Fields sticks with Penn State or goes wherever else, if, they decide to move in a different direction from Williams, or he goes elsewhere and Jones the same, then this could circle back around and Milton could very well end up the quarterback in the Gators class. It's just, they're not ready to take his commitment at this point.
Yep. Guys, anything quickly before we wrap this one up?
We didn't talk about the shark.
Oh
God. We didn't. It looks like Jim McElwain. It looks like Jim McElwain. It's not Jim McElwain. If you zoom in on the face, I mean, exactly. Actually, there's some people that are saying that it's Jimmy John, the owner of Jimmy John's. Because he's a well-known hunter of like exotic animals. Yes. Yeah. Yep. So they're saying that people believe that that's him, and he looks similar to Jim McElwain. But no, it was funny though. It was funny. But to be honest, Jim's not that fat. I mean, he's not a small guy, but that guy covering the shark weighs about 300 and some pounds.
I saw it over the weekend, and as soon as I saw
it was like part of a photo shoot for his new Belk ad. It's like their anything goes line. On the bottom of the hat it says, "We're down for whatever."
Hey, Bill,
it's the offshore fishing collection.
There you go. Hey, Jim, you forgot your fishing shirt and your fishing pants. What's that?
Let's be honest though. If they made that like an edit for Gator recruiting, it still would be better than what Joker Phillips did.
Yes. Hey, Jim, you forgot your Columbia.
There's going to be signs with rival fan bases this year with that picture.
Yes. Hopefully,
I may have to get a copy and have Mac autograph it.
we know game day the first week's going to FSU Bama, but maybe with Florida Tennessee can get some hype up right there, and maybe game day because definitely
that's going on game day.
Definitely early on in the season, there is no way that it's not getting changed.
What's even more funny is that UAA actually had to call him and ask him. That's even more funny. Okay, we got a PR nightmare on our hands, Coach. Is that you? And
it was a simple. That's not me.
He should have been like, "It's none of your business."
Oh God!
Hey, I got 2 shout outs I need to give. That's cool.
Okay. Yep.
Hey, I had to send out a belated birthday to one of our friends over at Gator Bait, where we love to post. That's part of the 24/7 network, gatorbait.net. Jay Holmes, he mentioned that all he had wanted was a birthday shout out. And
that's right.
This past week. I don't know how I missed it, man, but happy belated birthday to you. And thank you for your support, buddy. We love talking to you over there. And also Terrence Simmons, who said on Twitter tonight he would be excited to listen in live. And we really appreciate your support, buddy.
Yeah, hopefully he's on there live. Hopefully so. So guys, thank you. We've run some numbers lately. Thank all you guys for out there listening to Gators Breakdown. Getting more popular by the week, it seems like. So I can't thank you enough out there. So as I mentioned, you can find Joey, or earlier in the show, you can find Joey Vizzi on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports. You can find Bill on Twitter at Real B Sykes. I'm David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys, one last thing before we go. Anything?
Thank you to all our fans. I appreciate it. We're nothing without the fans. I mean, it's you guys that are listening to us. It's you guys that are downloading us on iTunes and SoundCloud and listening to us on YouTube and putting up with Bill. We thank you for everything that you have to do. So in listening to Bill. We thank you very much for your time, and we thank you for everything. And like I said, we're nothing without you guys. We're basically just three guys talking to air.
Well, one of us is.
Oh, man, that was good. Good way to end it there. So, guys, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.